Hello and welcome to the Horse Race Politics podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Louis Bromfield, postdoctoral researcher in politics at Swansea University. And we're joined today by Plaid Cymru, a party committed to independence, which makes a refreshing change from my co-host, who hasn't had an independent thought in years. It's Professor Matthew Wall. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah. I'm just eating so much tofu and reading so much Guardian that you can predict my answers pretty easily. Yeah.
And I think because of the connection to the guest, I'm going to throw this one over to Matthew to introduce our wonderful guest for today, because it's through you that we are joined by who?
By Taylor Reynolds.
So Taylor Reynolds is indeed our guest. Taylor, you're very welcome. Taylor is in the unusual position of being both a student here at Swansea University and a named candidate on a Plaid Cymru list for the upcoming Senate election. So we thought, like, who better can we get in here to represent Plaid for our series than Taylor, who, we basically first started chatting like earlier in this academic year, wasn't it? And you'd sort of noticed some of the stuff we'd been putting out and came to tell me a little bit more about how the candidate nomination process had been going. We kind of struck up a friendship from there. But maybe for people who haven't heard your life story already, like I have, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about, like your background, how you got into politics, the kind of, it might be interesting to hear a little bit about what we discussed, like that process of getting selected onto a list and how that worked out for you.
Yeah, so don't know how much context I need to give, because usually I ramble a little bit. But I think I started getting into politics. I've always been quite interested in politics my whole life. I remember for some reason when I was in like year 7 in school, and I'd be speaking to my history teacher about like Brexit and stuff, and I don't know how much I actually did know about it, but I sort of performatively did, at least. And then I think the 2020 COVID lockdown period, a lot of phone time, a lot of screen time, and I think during that period there was a massive sort of, not like a liberalisation, but the whole woke thing, and I think the murder of George Floyd and stuff, I think that really sort of brought me into the sphere of politics. What I was seeing, like, I was very strongly against injustice, and I felt it quite passionately. So from there I just became sort of embroiled in politics, and immediately tended towards the left, which I still do. And then initially I was in the Labour Party, or like supportive of them, just because they were like left tendency, and also in the United Kingdom, I think the Labour Party, if you're a left-wing person, I think you automatically associate.
It's kind of like a natural home, isn't it? When you're just navigating, especially as you're navigating into politics, who am I hearing the most about? Who seems to be most popular? And
especially in Lleisiau, where I'm from, it's only ever been a Labour constituency for like 110 years or whatever. So then I went to King's College London originally to study politics, and that was really interesting. Great, lots of different people, great, education there and stuff. And
just not the lectures weren't just quite as good though, is it?
No, not really.
Much more attractive.
They didn't have any podcasts, which I was really disappointed about. So I was there, and I think it was it'd been October 2023, after the horrendous terrorist attack from Hamas on the festival in Israel. And I remember the election was coming up, and I just thought, like, I had quite not a big background, but I had quite good knowledge, I felt, of the whole Israel-Palestine situation. I'd read on Palestine by like Ilham Pape a few years before. I was a Holocaust Educational Trust youth ambassador as well.
Okay.
So I'd sort of had this obviously a big aversion to genocide generally, but I think you could sort of see where this was going towards, and then there was a disproportionate response from Israel, whatever. And I remember I was in my university account in London, and I saw Keir Starmer was on LBC with, I think, Nick Ferrari. And Nick Ferrari's like, Mr. Keir Starmer, do you believe Israel have the right to sort of terminate the water supply? And so, and Keir Starmer, who ostensibly his raison d'etre in this role as the candidate to be Prime Minister, was an international human rights lawyer. You'd think he'd never stand for human rights abuses. And he was like, I actually do think they have the right, And I thought, God, well, that's, to me, the moral litmus test of our times. So I immediately became disillusioned with them then. And as the election got into full swing, I saw Reen was on Good Morning Britain arguing or debating with Kate Garraway about the whole HS2 thing.
This is Reen ap Iorwerth you're referring to as the leader. Just for people who aren't following politics.
Reen ap Iorwerth. And he was on there, and he made to me a very, very coherent and articulate pitch to me that really sort of woke me up to the realities of the Welsh condition, which previously I thought I knew about, but I didn't really understand the scale of it today. Obviously, the history of like oppression and
Yeah.
everything. I was well
I think it
aware
was
of that.
HS2 he was particularly going on about
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
that. If I recall the same interview, yeah, that was a big breakthrough moment for him, I think, on the UK level stage.
100%. I
Yeah.
think that was a big turning point for a lot of people. Like a lot of people on the doorstep today really reference that. And that's the key thing with a lot of these Welsh issues within Plaid Cymru and devolution things, is that it is quite a complex situation. And so like the Barnett formula and all of these different sort of little parts and details that go along with the devolution settlement, it's really hard to get people to understand that in a way that isn't filled with jargon and in a way that's accessible. And he did that really successfully to me. And so that helped remove the narrative that existed in my brain around Plaid Cymru previously, which was that like it was this sort of single issue party that was only to do with these abstract or like romanticist patriotic values to do with like it's just independence, which is just the language. And although I am a first language Welsh speaker, really proud of the language, you know, I thought politically I couldn't really rely on a party that only pushed that forward, but that isn't the case at Plaid Cymru now. And I think
So you didn't see it as a kind of scalable offer in a sense,
No.
right? Yeah, okay, interesting.
And I think, you know, and honestly, I've been in with Plaid now for 2 years, and I think we're a very professionalized outfit. But I don't really know. I know a lot about the history and the formation of it, but I don't know what it was like before Reen came in. So, you know, I don't want to abash them and say they were only like this. You know, previously they only cared about sort of the language and sort of having reparations or something.
But this was your progress, your sort
Yeah.
of journey, and there was a sort of a moment where the kind of wider scope of what they were offering and the more, would it be right to say, like kind of pragmatic focus?
Yeah, 100%.
I think with Reen, that's been a characteristic of his discourse, is kind of a very practical, pragmatic
Yeah.
focus.
I think particularly you see that with the whole independence thing, because for me personally, I'd say I'm indie curious. Like I don't really, almost agnostic in a way, where it's like I don't actually have enough, I don't have the requisite information to make a proper decision yet. And I think Reen, he's definitely pro-independence, right? But he's also aware that most people are in my position where we don't have access to the information. We don't know exactly what it would look like. And instead of sort of going on and straight saying, okay, yeah, we want to have an independence referendum, he said, we'll delay any sort of referendum to ensure that there's a discourse around it first and make sure that we're building to a point where we can actually have an open conversation. Because at the moment, I'd say we're building towards it, but I think we are still far away from being at a point where we could have a referendum. So I think that is a great example of one of those pragmatic moves that have made a difference.
Yeah, you really have to bring the voters with you. You can't just say this is what we're going to do, especially when it's such a distant reality from we need an independence referendum because it's going to greatly improve the quality of life on all these really kind of bread and butter issues. To get people to join you on that front, you have to get them through this hoop of we should have an independence referendum. Here are the benefits. We need to have the referendum, actually vote, have the fallout. And like, let's be real, British history is kind of a little bit tainted recently by referendums. I think that's
But they haven't necessarily fixed the things they were set to fix, right?
Exactly. And if the general prevailing logic is we're better outside of this union than in, I mean, that's a fresh scab for half the country, isn't it? If not more, if we look at opinion polling, it's like something around 70% of people think that Brexit was a terrible idea.
Well,
for varying reasons, obviously.
I mean, it was horrific. And I do think, I don't like the sort of going in too much about the negativity and focusing on reform and stuff. With messaging, I try not to focus too much on them, although I am brutally aware of their sort of, I don't know, the problems that exist within that party. But I think one thing with reform and their ilk is that Nigel Farage hasn't been held to account nearly enough by the media about the fact that he spearheaded this whole Brexit thing and the fact that it happened, whatever, and he was campaigning on it for years, Eurosceptic for years, saying that this was the magic bullet that would change British history. And then what he's been campaigning for years and years and years transpired, it happened, and now during the fallout of that, he's come back and he said Britain's broken, but actually I've got a new answer.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Well, the next thing's the European Convention of Human Rights, right?
Right,
That's
exactly.
The next Brexit that they're after, which, I mean, fundamentally, for people who don't really like engage in politics that well, it might just seem like another thing to leave. But even just trying to position yourself so that you're swapping that for one constitution for another, to just leave that is an insane pushing of acceptable political rhetoric.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, the Overton window with reform seems to have shifted quite dramatically, and by the Overton window, I mean what's relevant to speak about in politics.
What's
or
kind of
acceptable.
possible and
Yeah.
acceptable to speak about.
And it's crazy how quickly it's changed, because I feel like when I first got embroiled in politics, mainly digitally, it felt like the Overton window was significantly more left in terms of, okay, there's much more acceptance of like structural inequalities that exist within the world, and there was a not an attack on free speech, but there was a limitation on sort of hate speech and stuff that was considered acceptable within the political sphere. But now it just seems like radically shifted again. But it's bounced back. We've overcorrected further right now. So it's really quite discombobulated to be involved in it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and just to go back to one of your earlier points, because obviously this whole election, in a way, one of the big narratives is Labour defection to Plaid Cymru, and that's been often painted as largely due to kind of a disaffection with like the performance of Labour. But do you think, like in your kind of generational cohort among younger people, like you mentioned, like Palestine as a kind of a mobilising issue, so it's one of the things that obviously the Senate doesn't have like an army to send in.
No, of course.
But like it has differentiated, like I would say, Plaid Cymru and the Greens versus like Welsh Labour or like versus UK Labour, like a much more firm stance on that issue, much more kind of calling out of this sort of campaign of genocide that many people would see happening. Do you think for your generation, kind of coming up with that as a big issue, as you mentioned, with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and all of the kind of subsequent iterations of that, so that kind of social, let's call it social conservatism and international relations conservatism, that as much as anything was what kind of opened you up to listen to other voices.
I think definitely, the conservatism from Labour and things sort of turned me off from them. I don't think I would like jump on a party just because, for example, they would call out the actions of the Israeli state, as in I wouldn't immediately ascribe to all of their views, because I think that was, to me, that is the sort of just the correct way to go about it, right? So it's like, I don't really praise a party particularly for like having that strong stance, because that's how it should have been, but I definitely became disaffected with parties who didn't do that. But yeah, I think those issues are really mobilising. I do know, I'm pretty sure that like research has shown that it's mainly young people. A lot of young people are really mobilised by those issues, and I don't know what particularly it is about these issues that does that. I think maybe young people are a lot more passionate, radical in some aspects, but also, being exposed, I think, especially to the genocide in Gaza, online and things, and it shows you, and then you've just come out of the education system, which is telling you that we're teaching you about the Holocaust, we're teaching you about all of these,
and being like a responsible citizen, like we talk about here in Wales, a global citizen, right? These are elements that we're actually trying to inculcate.
And then you come out of it and you're like, and also I think if you're politically active too, or like a student, for example, I go into these lectures, and I was in these grand lectures in King's College London, and this, the lecturers tell me, we have all of these institutions now, the ICJ, the UN Court of Human Rights, all of these different sort of settle, and the Geneva Convention, all this, and he's like, this is what sort of creates world order, and it's sort of this what's called the liberal view of the rules-based international order.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you come out of the lecture, you look at your phone, and it's like a hospital has just been bombed, in Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu is telling us that every single building in Gaza was a Hamas stronghold. And you're like,
and Keir Starmer's telling you this is fine within an international law. Well, I mean, more or less, right?
And his entire background is supposedly to do with justice and an international human rights law. So you're like, how is he squaring this? And then so you get a bit disaffected by the whole everything, because you're like, the world that I am being told exists doesn't seem to actually exist. And so I think these big events, and especially the fact you can see them all the time on your phone, I think that opens you up a lot to have more passion towards them, because they're so right in front of you.
Do you feel like, generally speaking, and I want to say younger people, I'm 27, I'm still young, I'm clinging on, but by being proxy associated with Matt, I'm like 63.
Yeah, I'm aging you at a rapid rate. Yeah.
Loyalties to parties, like for a lot of the stuff that we kind of talk about, following along opinion polling, is we're seeing a lot of anger at Labour, the kind of common consensus behind the 2024 result was that was not necessarily an endorsement of Labour, this big passionate Labour base, but more of a, we're so done after 15 years of Tories, let's give you guys a chance. And now that they're screwing up, Plaid, you have a chance, or Reform, you have a chance, right? Do you find that is it more of like single issue passion or just apathy with the options that you're given generally, in terms of maybe legacy parties?
In terms of, is that the reason behind?
Yeah, is that the reason
them?
why we're kind of seeing surges for? Obviously, not the single reason.
Yeah.
But
No,
one of
that's
the
right.
main
Yeah,
reasons.
I think that's a fair observation to make in terms of, I definitely think it's a contributing factor, probably quite a large one, right? And I also think that's how democracy works. I mean, if a party has failed you for so long, then you are going to look at the alternatives. In my opinion, Plaid sort of was always the viable alternative in many respects. Like, it's not just because of the performance of Labour that they are. To me, there's something, I don't want to get too sort of romantic. There's something intrinsic about Plaid in terms of being, the only party that is centred in Wales, ruled in Wales, only stands in Wales, etc. Like that. That is something that actually does, for me, have a tangible difference, and it makes them much more sort of
rooted.
Yeah, relevant to me. But no, I think definitely the failings of Labour and the fact that they've had such a massive majority and they ran on this whole programme of change, and then it just appears as if, that change is impossible, even though they've got sort of a 350 plus majority. It's like, how can you U-turn on almost every single thing that you are putting forward? I mean, the winter fuel payment thing, etc. It just makes it seem like, these people can't get anything done. And then when you see in Wales the devolution settlement and Keir Starmer undermining devolution in that memo, I think people are becoming a lot more, woken up to the fact that, okay, we are in sort of a predicament that I think is profoundly unfair, and it's a systematic injustice in many ways.
So what kind of stuff then? If we go back to the final bit on Plaid before we get into some horse racing.
Wait, can I just ask before we get into
may.
Plaid pitch? Like, tell us about becoming a candidate.
Oh yes,
what was that like? How was that? How did that go? Not many people do that. Yeah, no, it's okay.
No,
this is not the most organised pod either. So it's not helping.
So at first, I got into the party when I moved back from London. I came back. My father had some health issues, but he's fine now. But luckily, I ended up here. So, it was great.
Yeah.
Silver lining. And so I got involved more locally with the party, and I became like the youth officer, social media officer. And then last year in the summer, I stood sort of almost like a lamb to slaughter in the first county council by-election in Llanelli, where I live, which was the first one that Reform competed in.
Okay.
So it was a bit of a rough break, definitely, and we didn't have much support there. But I learned on that I was really, really into and interested in sort of electoral politics and like knocking on doors,
campaigning, right?
Old school stuff.
And it was definitely like intimidating and a great learning curve. And I know as well, like I'm only going to turn 21 in April, right? So I've got, I might be a bit young and sort of innocent in terms of I don't know about what the future holds for people the longer you're in politics. But for me, it was a great experience. And then, so there was the hustings and everything. We selected our 6 candidates in the order, and then I was informed that you need an emergency candidate in every place. So you can have 8 candidates on the list.
So there's only, just to say it for people at home, so there's each constituency is like a maximum of 6. So imagining Plaid won 100% of the vote, you'll get 6 candidates. However, there can be extra list places for various things.
For guys like me. So I'm 7th on the list. I did have to go through the whole process anyway, so I had to have a meeting with 3 members of the NEC of Plaid, and I'm on the executive committee of Plaid Youth, so that's where a lot of my stuff is done. My contributions to the party are largely via that, on social media and things. But that was, I had to have like an interview with like the chairman and things, and that was a really fun experience, but they must have liked me sufficiently to pass me through anyway. And then, basically I was just on the list in 7th place, and now we have got an 8th. But it's very interesting. It's a weird position to be in. Bit of like a political purgatory where it's like you're kind of a
And did you send them your like picture and stuff? Is it all, because it obviously, it populates the
100%. And I have to do
paper.
I've done all of the sort of training that we have, the mandatory training. That's been great for me because it's been sort of like, almost like free
political education, like a masterclass.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really setting me up hopefully for future electoral pursuits.
Wonderful.
obviously, because I'm not going into it with any expectation of being elected, because that would be, well,
There'd be good effort.
yeah, it'd be fantastic. It would be
Create seats for
yeah,
you.
it would be almost sort of
Yeah,
a
but-
breach of the electoral
But
commission.
nearly any politician like has to start off in this kind of more service kind of role to the party to basically to prove yourself as
Yeah,
a good campaigner. And that is why, I mean, there are structural reasons why it's hard as a young person to get in. But there's also the fact that there's people who've just been at it longer doing this kind of blooding and proofing. And so like that is a feature of like any political system is like those kind of candidates who are basically standing to drive the party vote as much as possible, but have little realistic chance of winning. But that's a part of a career that
Yeah.
most politicians should
And
go
also,
through.
like, I'm really quite passionate about the sort of movement and about the party, and I really believe in it. So I'm happy to advance it in any way that I possibly can to help it. And it's great as well to learn from these people who have been in the party for so long. I mean, I was speaking to Kevin Campbell the other week, who's number one in Carmarthenshire, where I'm standing, and he's always been really great for like the youth in the party. He's very sort of helpful in that regard. And he was telling me like he couldn't believe the difference in support now from when he started out. And for them, because since I've been in the party, and I don't think this is me that's caused this, but since I've been in the party, it's been a disproportionate, like it's been an unprecedented rise. And so, yeah, for me, it's like almost, okay, the number of support is shocking and everything, but I've only ever been in the party when it's been growing.
Yeah,
Whereas for
yeah.
these people who have put their lives and souls into not only representing their community, but also the party and their beliefs, it must be so sort of rewarding and bewildering at the same time for them.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
great to just see that for them, because they've earned they've really like worked for this situation to be in, and I think that's very inspirational. It also shows that like politics is a long game, but that's ultimately the whole point as well, I think, is that.
And you've had a better experience with your party's NEC than Andy Burnham's had with Labour, so
Yeah.
I think that's your win for the year. is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you're doing better than he is.
I'm quite glad that I didn't get the Burnham treatment.
Can you just hit the audience, us, with the party pitch? What's
Yeah.
Plaid's offering?
So
And just to say, as of now, the manifesto isn't published yet, but it's
it's-
forthcoming.
Say what you can say without getting in trouble.
Okay, well, the manifesto will be coming out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know if we have announced it. I know when it's been released, but I
Yeah.
No. I mean, just to say, as we're recording, it's
Yeah,
not
it hasn't-
published, so
no,
we
it's
can't
not.
like
We have
ask
got
you
the
about it.
100
Yeah.
days plan,
Maybe
of course.
your general ideological bit.
Yeah,
What are you
yeah.
saying on the doorstep to people?
Okay, so it's like a twofold sort of argument. So firstly, on our own merits, it's heavy focus on reforming health, ensuring that the education system is brought back from the dire straits that it's in currently. I think one of the most scandalous almost aspects of the Welsh Labour governance recently is the fact that we've plunged into these horrific reading and literacy rates in the education. And one of the elements of that is this phonics. We moved away from phonics, which is against the whole international consensus and everything, which Kevin Campbell has pledged to change. And I don't know if the Welsh government have cheekily said that they're going to just change it before we get in.
Okay.
But so definitely getting back to basics on a lot of things as well, because I think it's hard when no other party's been in. So it's coming in. Yeah, I'm trying to ensure I stay on the Plaid message.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard when you haven't been in government before, any other party, so want to go in and
Yeah.
check. But yeah, it's more ambition in terms of the devolution settlement is really important for us. I think modernising, again, the health system and getting those waiting lists down, tackling child poverty with the direct child payment, the Canal scheme, and then like other offerings that we've already had in place for multiple months at this point. Like last year, I remember I was making videos on our policies to do with free swimming lessons, universal free swimming lessons, and then we've got the childcare offer as well, and a library in every single primary school and things like that. So we've got a large scale offering in terms of trying to be ambitious and trying to enact real change. But I think the main thing as well is that you have a party and a government that is led in Wales by people who believe in Wales as a nation, not just in terms of independence or anything like that, but in terms of actually, instead of being blindly sycophantic to the UK government, actually standing up for us and saying, no, this isn't fair. The HS2 debacle is not fair. The Crown Estate not being devolved is unfair. and it has a tangible impact on people's lives. So definitely going after that and ensuring that the devolution settlement is improved and there's fair funding for Wales will be a massive part of it. But I prefer to lead on the other policies in terms of the things we can actually enact.
Because you have more autonomy in those.
Yeah, because the devolution things is like, okay, a lot of it might be to do with rhetoric and actually just changing how we approach governance in Wales. But also we have to admit that, Westminster, we'd have to negotiate for all those things. So they might take some time. So
yeah, can we just stop on that element for a second though? Because I think that's a key line of critique that Plaid face, which is like, if Sir Keir Starmer sends you guys a memo that says more or less the same thing, or if Westminster continues to basically ignore these kind of requests, like, or what? Like, what will Wales actually do? What would a Plaid Cymru led government do other than just kind of give out about it? Is there an or what? And like, if there isn't, I mean, my perception is that there isn't, and that's not a particular fault of Plaid,
other than just like screaming.
But it is difficult to see how things can change just by discourse changing.
I think, I don't have a great answer on this.
It's a difficult
This is where, like, sort of the party, I would turn to the party authoritative figures on this, but Rena's definitely talked about how, I think there's, maybe it was in Scotland where when they changed the sort of rhetoric around it, there actually was tangible changes. And I mean, we're never going to get anywhere now when Labour and Joe Stevens, the Welsh Secretary of State, is saying that sort of HS2 never existed now after campaigning on the fact, or in opposition was happy to say that the HS2 robbery, or needed to be
Great
paid back
Train
to us.
robbery, was that ever used? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And then when they get into government, they're saying, oh no, it didn't ever exist or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think any change from that is big. But obviously, I think there will have been discussions within the party with Reen, etc., about how to enact those levers of change. But I think that's why it's important to have the first lot of proper policies and not rely too heavily on the devolution part, because really people understand that is something that needs to be worked out over a longer term, and it's not certain to happen, So.
Oh, and Scotland have managed to get a much fairer crack of the whip than Wales have.
But they had an or what, which is we'll vote for independence in a referendum.
Yeah.
Well,
at least that was an or what for a while, and then like that did extract a lot of concessions for Scotland.
Yeah. Well, that's the shame of us not having we haven't had too much of a nationalist fervour before, I think, because now we're in a position where Scotland have a better settlement deal. I don't know how that works in terms of how what that makes the United Kingdom look like, because if we've got like multiple different levels of sort of devolution,
depending on how hard you kick out at Westminster,
Yeah.
it is a bit irrational, isn't it?
It's not very fair. And so but I'm sure that at the negotiations will actually take place, I'd imagine, which is a change. They're not even taking place at the moment, and in fact, Elena Morgan seemed quite content with the fact that Keir Starmer was willing to undermine devolution and her government
and her own name.
I'd be furious if my boss was telling people just not to listen to my work.
Yeah. Maybe can I hit you with the Welsh Labour attack line, if that's okay? So I got this through my letterbox the other day.
Go for it.
Which is like, we're building Wales' green energy future. Plaid Cymru are going to block green developments, and what they're trying to get at is the sense of, like, Plaid is trying to kind of merge a new, more urbanised electorate to a more traditionally, like, rural electorate, and that those kind of cohorts have quite different opinions about development and pylons and such matters.
Certainly.
Do you think that's a fair line of attack or an effective one? I mean, I felt like you'd have to know quite a lot about Welsh politics to even get what this is about.
And you'd have to know like a decent amount about sort of green projects and things. And I think for Plaid, it's difficult because you're trying to ensure that sort of the natural resources of Wales are used to their correct amount, but also you're trying to preserve the beauty, and I think for many people that's a big thing in the countryside. But I think what it gets back down to is Plaid are really focused on sort of community-led projects on energy or community-focused things. So I think it is wholly unfair to say that we would shut down all new green projects. It's frankly ridiculous, actually, because Plaid are quite committed to sort of understanding and working with the fact that climate change is real and trying to focus on a net zero. But at some point, obviously, the deadline's been shifted now a little bit. But I think it comes down to what the specific community needs are, and also, from what I gather, there'll be more focus on trying to make sure that energy and the sort of revenue generated by those projects is fed back into the community, whether that's by a levy or whatever. But I think it is. I think it's really disingenuous to say that they're against, all sort of green projects, while then Reform are saying that we're totally pro all green projects. The truth must be somewhere in the middle. I don't think it can be one.
You can't be both things at the same time.
But that's when the Crown Estate then comes back into the conversation in terms of what the Treasury is entitled to, His Majesty's Treasury is entitled to in terms of Wales's own land, it's something like 12 miles out at sea, I think.
Yeah, so it's nautical miles out of the foreshore. It's there's loads and there's hundreds of thousands of acres of land. I think the portfolio is worth £350 million now. The rights to all gold and silver deposits in Wales, a lot of mineral deposits, a lot of sort of beaches and things. I mean, it's just atrocious. And the way it was set up in, I want to say, the 12th century, and it's still going on. And now the only reform that's been for it is the fact that it doesn't go straight to the monarch anymore. Instead it goes to His Majesty's Treasury.
Yeah.
And they decide where that revenue goes and who is, who's in charge of the assets. So it could go, I think there's a wind farm being built now or constructed maybe in Port Talbot or whatever, and I'm all for the investment, but it's from, I believe, a Norwegian firm. And it's why can't that revenue come back into Wales instead of going straight into the Treasury? And we have to bear in mind as well that Wales outproduces, or it exports 4 times as much energy as it uses up, but it has the highest energy bills in the UK. I mean, something's not going
I'm given
right
to
there.
understand energy is quite an important element of power.
Yeah.
We've been looking at the Straits of Hormuz over and over again, and nothing is shifting.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, I'm all for green energy. Just if you look at that, I mean, the reliance on oil and gas means that any sort of instability in other areas means that we're hit with the sort of bad the side effects of things that we're not even involved in.
Yeah.
So becoming energy self-sufficient is a big aspect of things.
Horse race time.
Shall we hit the horse race?
Yes. So, horseracepolitics.com. For anyone who wishes to play along, we're into the hundreds of people on the website now.
It's building up.
And the headline race that we have is this one, as to which party is going to win the most seats in the Senedd, which I'm sure you'll be happy with. Our users currently give Plaid Cymru a 60% chance of winning the most seats. This is not outright majority, coalition, government formation, and it's nothing to do with that. It's just will they win the most seats. Do you think that's fair? 60% chance?
Well, given the recent polling, if we're going timely, when was it? Yesterday or the day before?
It was feels like yesterday.
When we're recording this, anyway. The new YouGov MRP poll came out. Beautiful. And I think, I would say probably 60% is fair. I would probably think that's quite
It would be
high.
pretty big campaign shift right now for that to flip.
Yeah, 100%.
Just to say, though, on this front, because I've had some people talking to me about polls that we show on the pod and so on. So this is one pollster.
Yes.
And this is a kind of collaborative polling between ITV, between Cardiff University, and between YouGov. And so in my experience of analysing poll accuracy, this has a very high reputation in terms of the methods and techniques that they use. But you can equally find other polls that have this much closer.
100%.
Have Reform kind of edging ahead. And so you might say 60% seems kind of thin when you're looking at a fairly sustained polling lead in this series now, as we're kind of really getting into the campaign season. But you have to bear in mind that other pollsters can provide much closer characterizations.
And the pollsters are available.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
But I think YouGov have been fairly accurate. And I mean, I don't think, in terms of the campaign, I don't think we're going to take anything for granted. I mean, it's very cliche, but the only poll that matters is
the one on the election day.
But I think it's really good. It's a good sort of bellwether. I think after you look at Caerphilly as well, where sort of the polling for that, if I recall correctly, didn't look as sort of momentous for Plaid as it came to be.
It was a dramatic overperformance by Plaid. I mean, the polling wasn't polling at that level of the national level polling that we're looking at there is proper large decent sized sample. The constituency level polling for by-election is always thinner, more partial. But nonetheless, whatever I saw was pretty much a 2-horse race. And then you smashed it, right?
Yeah. I remember that. That was I was very unconfident that day. So I thought everything you see online around that by-election, anything I put out for Plaid Ifanc, the Plaid Youth section, or me personally, always filled with sort of reform attacks and things like that. And I didn't see much support. And I just think maybe, I don't know about the whole bots business, or I think there's probably questions to be asked there. But also, I think you get a lot of people in the replies to social media and things that actually aren't able to vote in that area. I see a lot of like Facebook comments of people saying Wales needs reform, and they're commenting from Kent or somewhere. So, you know, I think this kind of reflects what we're seeing on the doorstep, I think, definitely.
And just to say, I mean, it is something we're actually kind of concerned about ourselves as people involved in like digital political engagement, is like how difficult it is to know what's real and what's not real. So we were talking about a bit of Baudrillard just before the recording started. Like where it's kind of, I think we've got a reasonably good system in terms of we have real people making real predictions. What's very difficult, you put something on social media, is this a genuine person? Is this like an algorithmic bot? Is this somebody from another political system trying to push a message? Is this somebody who's paid to use their social media? And so like it is very difficult to navigate, and that's something we've tried to just have here is like, well, what's the aggregate opinion? Without like, you know, and everybody weighing the same is very important.
Yeah, exactly. And I
approach.
think here as well, it's kind of quite, and listen, I quite like qualitative stuff. I enjoy the abstract. In terms of like education, I much prefer things that don't have a 100% answer, yes or wrong. I prefer to argue, but this is very useful in this day and age, I think, because you get that sort of almost objective idea or quantitative idea of what's going on. Because I just, I could speak for hours about sort of the social media and the political sphere on there, because it is quite something. I mean, and there's loads of ideas that exist now and truths that exist in people's minds, like voters' minds, that just aren't true. I mean, we can talk about a million different things applied with the whole immigration, like asylum seekers thing, and there's, in my opinion, sort of this crazy over exaggeration about the nation of sanctuary, which is only 0.05% of the CNS budget, but everyone seems to really care about that.
I know over on For Wales, See Wales, they've done quite a lot of coverage on the nation of sanctuary, the relative smallness of it, its tendency to focus on refugees from the Ukraine conflict as well. And ultimately, I suppose some of these ideas about people integrating, I mean, that's basically what it's meant to be, right?
Well,
so,
these people who are anti the idea of immigration and against the idea of the nation of sanctuary would ostensibly prefer immigrants to come in who we have no control over, and then not integrate and not have accommodation and not learn the language and not work, and then they'll complain about that as well. So, you know, it's very difficult, but I think in terms of the likelihood of this, I think that I'd put it probably a bit higher. I'd probably put like 70-75%.
Yeah.
I think it would be a big shame.
I think it would be a shock. It would be a surprise. I mean, you have what? The amount that people are accounting for reform is about, what is it?
26% chance of reform being the party with the most seats.
I will say we did have similar kind of predictive numbers over, like, do you guys know 538, which is like a kind of an American kind of forecasting website, now defunct, but this wasn't dissimilar to what Donald Trump was getting on 538 in the run to the Clinton, the 2016
the margins were even bigger, I think, at that point. Like,
wow.
So
there's a very big silent majority that would need to turn out for the polls to be consistently wrong. But as you say, I mean, it's not just the ITV Wales poll is the only one, but there are polls.
I think there are like nowcasts or something, which are like, is there like aggregates of all of the polling together? I think those are probably the best.
And they're fairly consistently put implied, like, you know, it's comfortably ahead. Should we look at the MRP actually? So this is a kind of a modelling strategy where you kind of push the polling numbers across the constituencies, and so this is what YouGov as a polling company has kind of pioneered here in the United Kingdom, and this is what it looks like, which is a fairly nice looking picture for Plaid, right? If this was to eventuate.
Reform tend not to be too happy with YouGov. I think they had a lot of problems with them recently in the Times.
Well, effectively, this speaks to, I know Matt can talk for eons about electoral systems, but effectively, and I know this isn't first past the post necessarily in a Westminster sense, but one of the main stories of the 24 election was how Reform were able to pick up a massive chunk of votes but get disproportionately kind of shafted when it came to translating that into seats. But what that did for fragmentation across constituencies nationally, that they're able to kind of whip up a lot of people, but not enough in the right places.
Yeah.
It doesn't translate accurately. Plaid are only, as you see, you know, I don't want to be, what's the word? Translating seats into kind of geographical coverage because populations are obviously different.
Yeah.
But it's like, even on just a purely visual basis, Plaid, you're looking at this, what, I don't know, 2 years ago before the election?
Well, yeah,
and they're
exactly.
over the moon. I feel like Reform's kind of expectations are a little bit different. Like, I think I put this to Francesca last week, or the Reform councillor, that realistically, coming in second is probably the best thing for Reform in this position. It means you get the soapbox of second, the soapbox of kind of national coverage for whatever that Wales has. It's not fantastic. Without any of the responsibility.
But it's also worth saying they're going from like less than 2% of the votes to close to a third of the seats. That's that's a good trajectory for them as
really
well.
good.
Yeah, it's a very good trajectory, and I think I think the consensus at the moment in terms of people who are involved or engaged with politics is that the case is that Reform might prefer, or they'd at least be satisfied, I think, with being the opposition party, because it's very easy to whip up then a lot of sort of narratives and rhetoric, and you're in the position of being the scrutinizers instead of being the scrutinized, which is much easier for a party like Reform, because a lot of what they do is sort of shout about grievances and things, and they are quite good at that. I think.
Yeah, they are very
or at
good.
least they're very effective at communicating those grievances. So,
do you think that Plaid feel emboldened and ready for ruling Wales? If we're going to be seeing
from
something
what
like
I've seen,
this?
100%. I think I was at the party conference a couple of weeks ago, and I think the mentality there of like sitting as members and like high-ranking candidates that I've spoken to was definitely a sense of like duty as well as being prepared. I mean, thing is, I'd obviously say this, I am aware, but they do really care about the people of Wales as opposed to just sort of party politics. I mean, that's why when you get these attacks from Reform stuff about Plaid and Labour being too, I mean, the thing is that we were happy to engage in this cooperative agreement or work with Labour on certain things because it was all about sort of letting the country function and getting things done for the people of Wales as opposed to just being partisan. So I think there is a sense of like, they feel the weight of responsibility on our shoulders, but also there is an excitement there and a preparedness. I mean, we had the Making Wales Work economic document that Luke Fletcher conjured up, I don't know, a couple years ago now, I think, like 1 or 2 years ago, and that's been really highly touted in terms of by sort of IFS people and so forth. So I think they are ready. And I don't think it's sort of like a complacency where it's like they're expecting to win, but I do think there's definitely, I mean, they've been waiting for this for like 100 years.
Do you think though as well, I mean, and I think this is again just, it's kind of where campaign strategy and kind of governing approach can kind of be difficult to reconcile. So if Plaid are leading, right, which most of our market reckons they basically are, and it is not that far away from a majority, right? In principle, that's like a possibility. Like any campaign analyst would say nothing, right? Or I mean, like have hyper disciplined messaging.
The Ming vase.
Don't drop the vase.
Yeah, do a Keir Starmer on it. And yet, like, can that perhaps be a difficulty in the sense of, well, after the election, you're going to have to govern.
Well,
and there, just to say, there have been some, attack lines again against Plaid that they're a bit inclined to like set out a plan to make a plan, which is a great line in a campaign when you're winning. But like, is there a political cost? Do you agree with my contention? And do you think that it's costly?
I have seen those oppositions, and I do think, for example, I know a lot of work has gone into the 100 Days document. I thought it was very valuable and helpful, but I do also understand that sort of that preceding the manifesto was a bit difficult for people now because the voters may seem to think that was
the manifesto.
So it's very important now that when we bring the manifesto out, that we communicate it effectively, and there's a lot of sort of, we are going to do this is the problem, this is how we're going to fix it. Because I know the 100 Days document, I've had people and voters complain to me that sort of it was too much of establish and all of these.
Kick the can down the road. Or at least it can be characterised that way, yeah.
And so I do agree with the contention, like if that was our only offering, then it would be sort of, that would be it wouldn't be very useful to the voters. However, I think when the manifesto comes out, that will really be a good accompaniment to the 100 Days thing, which is a very pragmatic document because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, no other party apart from Welsh Labour have been in the government. So it is very sensible to me to say, listen, in the first 100 days, it's going to be about sort of finding our feet and understanding what the scope of everything is, and like speaking to the civil service, etc. So I think that, you know, it was a very sensible document to put out, but I do also agree that sort of in the manifesto, we're going to have to see some strong policy
Some from day one stuff.
put forward, because otherwise people are going to just think, well, there's a lot of sort of consulting and things, which, again, is necessary, but it's not really exactly what voters may want. And then there's the worry that sort of you only get voted in because you're not you're not Rishi Sunak, you know, like, or you're not Eluned Morgan, which Keir Starmer seems to be suffering with now, where it's like you win, and then
you try and do stuff, and people are like, we didn't agree to that.
Yeah. So I think winning on our own merit is equally as important to just winning just because reform, we're trying to stop reform. And I do think that hopefully I know the manifesto will show a lot more sort of oomph in terms of policy proposals.
So, arguably the biggest possible kind of fallout consequence from this election is what happens to your friend Keir Starmer.
Sir Keir Starmer.
Sir Keir Starmer, I should say. We haven't knighted him in the question on horse race, so sorry.
Yeah.
It's misgendering.
We have the horse race player base currently puts it at a 67% chance of no, he will not be replaced. Obviously, it depends on how Scotland goes as well. And we'll talk a little bit later, in a little bit.
And in England, of course, as well. The
local elections in England, yeah. How likely do you think this is? You can give a percentage if you want, but do you think that a Plaid win, no matter what, like whether they're largest party or there's some kind of coalition or whatever with the Greens, is enough to kind of motivate the Labour Party to try and wield the axe? Or do you think it has to be like Labour have to be like not even winning 10 seats?
Well, I think, to be honest, I mean, for me, if I was a member of the Labour Party and they lost Wales at all, I think that is sort of a killer blow for any Prime Minister. But in terms of what I think will actually happen, I'm unsure. I'm really unsure, because I don't know who would sort of succeed him. I don't think there appears to be.
I think that's the fundamental thing that's keeping him in place.
I mean,
right?
I think if Andy Burnham had been an MP and he'd been in the Gordon by-election, maybe, and he'd been elected in alternate
somebody would have swung that axe immediately.
It's like midday, 8th of May. Time to go.
100%. Yeah. But now I think, you know, it's not looking too feasible, I'd say. I'd err on the side of it won't happen, because as well, something's happening with the King's speech, and the King's speech has been moved to a certain date, and now I've seen some commentary about how, like, it's going to make it much more difficult for there to be like a leadership challenge by that date.
Okay.
So even if there was, but the forecast that you're seeing about sort of I don't know if you saw the Financial Times today, put out sort of a potential sort of projections of what's going to happen in the English local elections, and it's almost says that Reform might win like 2,200 seats. And therefore Labour might lose like 1,800. I mean, that would be catastrophic.
Carnage.
Yeah, that was what was the. I remember for my PhD research, final year of my PhD, when I can't remember, it was a senior Tory figure said, "Oh, we're probably going to lose 1,000 seats," just to try and do some expectation management, because he thought they'd actually lose like 500, and then they lost 1,000. Right? To be losing double that.
Yeah, and I mean, but the thing is about Starmer is like, I don't like him for stuff to do with like Wales, and I think, you know, it's disastrous in terms of the Israel stuff, but. Domestically and stuff, I just don't, you know, I think he's a bit feeble and hasn't used his majority to the best thing, but I think he gets a lot of like personal hatred sent
Pretty much everyone we talk to who's knocking on doors is like, everyone hates Keir Starmer. It's real.
Everyone does, like, and they're like sort of really visceral anger towards him, and online and stuff, and I'm just like, he's kind of inoffensive in many ways. It's just like he's just very.
Well, that was during the. I think we talked about this during the election campaign. There were word clouds being produced of like, what do you think of Rishi Sunak? What do you think of Keir Starmer?
Yeah.
And the Sunak one's like twat. It's like one of the biggest words. For Starmer, the biggest word was I don't know. Like, people didn't know anything about this guy. He had such a neutral, and in such a kind of polarized context, to sound really cliche, that's a blessing, right? For people to not have any kind of strong reaction towards you. And then within like 6 months, it was like, I actually want to hurt this man. Like, there is a legitimate anger. And I mean, the first kind of 3 major hits where you had the freebies, you had the winter fuel payments, and you had the disability payments. I'm like, surely it couldn't have taken a genius to see that was going to happen.
It was, it is crazy, because obviously I think, you know, I think he should have resigned over the whole Mandelson thing and everything. But I do think the level of sort of like emotional hatred people display towards these people, and it's not. I don't think it's very symbolic of a healthy democracy to have this level of like almost violent disdain towards our leaders who. I've seen much worse
They're
leaders.
people, and like they get elected, and there's other ways people can be in charge that aren't getting elected, which tend to be a lot less favourable.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
But
yeah, I don't know who would take him over. And frankly, none of them
can
are
you
gonna
see
change
any
it.
like just to say so? Yeah, I think we've talked. It's interesting, like just to talk about Welsh Labour a little bit because like. This kind of defeat now is basically priced in, right? So if you go back to like our like largest party market, they're effectively like flatlining. Like a tie is as
They're
likely as
tied with a tie.
they're tied with a tie.
7%. Our forecasters say Welsh Labour has a 7% chance of being the party with the most seats in the Senate.
So
which
1%
is very
of like
ambitious.
Glad and abolished.
Yeah, we'll get a Restore Britain line going on here soon.
Gosh,
I think if the news is to be believed.
And the kind of narrative with regards to like Labour from this latest MRP is like the Greens are right on them, but they're I mean, is there a world where you think like Labour can come back and get into the kind of early 20s in terms of seats? Because like it's hard to see more people abandoning them. They've been abandoned by, if you look at like some of the polling, like you're looking at people who have like an identity of Labour here.
Yeah.
Who
Generational identity.
Yeah,
as well.
generational identity.
Especially in Wales, where people will only have. I mean, the people coming into elections now will only ever have known
Yes.
a Welsh government.
But they've
strong
quite a way
connection.
to go to pick up second seats. That's I
Right.
think that's what as I see it, that's the issue they face. And like imagining Keir Starmer doesn't do anything different. Like, is there anything Eluned Morgan can do? It has seemed very difficult for her to like mobilise as well.
Yeah, I mean, she was in heck of a pickle. I think. I believe she wasn't really like wanting to be the first minister in the first place. It was more of a deprivation of anyone else who wanted to do it, right? So I do have empathy towards it because I think she's in a bit of.
Well, she didn't originally run like, in the Miles Gething race. Yeah.
So I think she's in a bit of an impossible situation. But then again, she was the first minister of the nation, and she's been completely unable to do anything in terms of get us better settlements with devolution. I don't know how she would win back people, for example, who've gone to reform, right? And I think with reform.
Well, ask Keir Starmer how that strategy's going. Yeah, like your whole time in charge. has been
I
trying
don't
to win
think
these people
ebbing
over.
more to the right is going to do anything for them because instead of sort of people becoming closer into Labour on the right, now what's happening is actually the people who are right wing. They say a few of them are saying that reform are too left wing for them now. So you're getting Restore Britain. So how far is they going to have to go? So I think
Especially
they'd
when
really
you look at the numbers, like if you combine Reform and the Conservatives from this alone, they're matching Plaid's entire vote share there. If you combine Labour onto that, you're talking of 47% compared to 34%. There's a much larger chunk of the electorate to aim at if you pivot left, especially.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've banged on for ages about the whole Red Welsh Way and clear red water and all this stuff. Like, to try and pivot right is.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say Starmer's been pivoting right, and Welsh Labour have pivoted into nothingness. Really,
Yeah, that's what it is. I think they seem to like not be pivoting, and there's nothing to be pivoting on
Yeah.
in the first place. Like,
Yeah.
there's no substance there. So I really
Apart
don't
from
know.
just to say the occasional, I don't know, the waiting lists going down. But like, it is difficult to claim things are good when things aren't good.
Yeah.
Like that is always that's tough territory for any governing party. But yeah, it just you kind of these kind of numbers until they happen is hard to believe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Pretty much across the board, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, for Welsh Labour, unfortunately, I do think it's sort of like an inevitability thing now with them. I do. I'm not saying that it's inevitable that Plaid will win, but I think when you speak to voters, I mean, lots of them say anyone but Labour.
Yeah.
Lots of them say, as you were talking about just now, with like their sort of legacy vote, and you're seeing a voter de-alignment from people who've whole generations have voted for Labour, but they're saying, I used to vote for Labour, but I'm just voting for Plaid now. Or there's people saying, I used to vote Labour, but now I'm moving to Reform. I don't get people who say, I am voting Labour. But, I think I probably had a few, but I think they were also probably active members of the local branch.
Yeah.
I think people who take in anything to do with politics at the moment are going to be against Labour, I think, just by virtue of the fact that, unfortunately, they aren't doing enough right. And if anything good they're doing, they're not able to sort of show that to the voters.
Yeah.
like, while they're not communicating anything effectively. Alina Morgan, at least when I remember looking at it, because the Plaid Youth account, I reached like 4,000 or whatever on it. And I looked at Alina Morgan and she only had like 400 followers on like, and she's the First Minister of Wales,
Yeah.
you know? And hopefully-
Everything she posts is just a torrent of abuse after it.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. And I feel awful for it. But it's like,
I think that is that's difficult. Yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha, yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, how is the youth section of Plaid having more than the First Minister? I felt like that was, I had imposter syndrome. So I was like, I actually kind of wish our First Minister did have more followers, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that I don't know. It's just a mess, isn't it? Because they don't seem to have one coherent identity at all, or an ideology at all.
Yeah. Cool.
Shall we-
Great crack in the
Shall we
sad sack?
great crack and sad sack? Did you have
Yes.
any ideas of like
Who's
people
had a good or bad week?
Well, obviously Plaid have had a good week, but in terms of just people, based on this poll, I'd like to say I don't like to go after anyone in particular, but I did like the fact that the one Welsh Conservative seat would be Darren Miller up in
Oh,
Craic,
wow.
which would mean that, unfortunately, someone who a very nice man, not a very nice man actually, called Andrew Artie Davis, would lose his seat. So he'd have to separate from his seat, and he spends a lot of his time calling Plaid Cymru separatists and sort of berating everyone to do with Plaid Cymru online. And I just think I quite enjoy the idea of him losing his seat, because I just think he's been
So
he's
kind
been
of
very vocal in his sort of,
Quite a sadistic great crack week for you. Like,
Yeah, it's great crack for
enjoyment
me in
of
that
someone else
sense.
suffering. Schadenfreude at the highest
yeah,
degree,
Schadenfreude, definitely. So yeah, I think he might be the loser of the week, but honestly, maybe he will win his seat. So I don't want that to come back and bite me. But obviously, I'm going to say Plaid Cymru will be the winners of the week.
Yeah.
Particularly, I think for me, Sir Gar. So like Kevin Campbell, Nerys Evans, and Price Murray Arthur, 4 candidates, 4 seats in Carmarthenshire, which is very big, I think, because I think we were thinking it would be about 3 originally. But that 4th is a big change. 'cause
Well,
I
as you
think
say,
Sonesi-
yeah, the history.
Sonesi's been very sort of a lot of reform. They're very active in the community, and it seems like there's a lot of reform support in Llanelli to see that sort of Carmarthenshire writ large is having more of a Plaid, is becoming more of a Plaid supporting area. I think that's very positive. So I think in areas where we expected a bit more of a reform thing, it's definitely a win for those constituencies as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, these aren't actual real
No,
voting
no, they're
numbers,
not
but
actual
like
results.
it's nice
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
I mean, it's as good as it gets in terms of predicting what's going to happen in constituencies, based on polling numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you have any nominations for great
Great crack.
sad sack?
Great crack, whoever had that trade on oil price contracts before Trump decided to make his intervention. Sad sack, whoever had the other side of that trade and didn't realise what was about to happen. It's starting to be a fairly clear pattern that like people are trading, making amazing trades that could really, I think, only be explained by some kind of insider knowledge. So sad sack, like global stability, great
Yeah.
crack, profiteering from global instability.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I did see an interview with the CEO of Polymarket, so more or less the cash-based version of Horse Race. Not that we're associated in any way.
Well, they're crypto. They're
crypto cash. But it's all monetary.
There's Kalshi as well. I think.
Kalshi, yeah. But they were talking about how a defense of kind of this insider trading, well, maybe not insider trading necessarily, but that people in these countries, that apparently there are some Iranian people, a country that has like no internet now, have been calling up the CEO of Polymarket and being like, bro, because of these bets, we knew to sleep near the bomb shelter tonight. This is fucking nuts, right?
Yeah.
That is utterly bewildering that gambling is now like the defense mechanism against war crimes.
Yeah,
right?
gambling is
just-
the new intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
it used to be the idea of wisdom of the crowd,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually just like corruption of the system is
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
is
exactly.
making this work.
For game.
I think the bad crack for global stability and the good crack for profiteering off of global instability
Yeah.
is sort of,
It's pretty much
the
a weekly
story of history.
Yeah.
weekly
It's like
item.
a sort of a Hegelian dialectic analysis of world history.
What about yourself, Louis? Did you have any?
So, contrary to all of the Labour bashing, I've nominated Keir Starmer as my great crack for the week. He appears quite a lot in our great crack and sad sack, but he has been, and again, the bar is in hell, but he has been relatively stable on Iran over the last few weeks. I've said time and time again that he would be a fantastic like foreign secretary and terrible prime minister, right? When it comes to international stuff, he's pretty good at that. But also because I think just today, Wes Streeting said that he doesn't want a leadership challenge after the elections. He says that we should give Keir Starmer a chance. And I thought it was quite an apt comparison for any football fans, is two of Chelsea's most expensive players, both signed for about £100 million each. Enzo Fernandez was asked whether he'd be at Chelsea next summer, and he said, we'll see what happens, right? We still got some games to go. Moises Caicedo was asked the same question, and he said, no, I want to become a Chelsea legend. And I'm thinking Wes Streeting, Angela Reyna, Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo. The fact that Angela Reyna hasn't said anything whilst Streeting is saying all of this, the only thing that really, I think, moves the needle on the will Starmer be replaced is Angela Reyna now at this point. She's the only person who's started to, once this kind of tax issue has been resolved, she's really the only person outside of Burnham who just isn't going to be in this position, who is a threat to him. And I think it's the only one who's actually lined up ready to replace him that people can coalesce around. If she came out and said, I want to be in charge, someone's going to swing the legs. I personally think.
And I do think Sam has done quite well on the whole foreign policy thing, although I do think I do think there was some form of, he did turn back on one of his statements like a couple of weeks ago where he was like, actually we are going to get back involved, but obviously he is due a U-turn every couple of weeks.
It kind of suits him though where the right decision is no decision.
Yeah.
Like that's Starmer's forte. So something eventually had to fall into that category.
The funniest thing I've seen for a while now, and not that war is funny, but he said that the HMS Dragon was in a state of advanced readiness. I loved that because I don't know what advanced readiness is, but I think it's so symbolic of the whole sort of Quango consulting, we'll have a concept of a plan idea of the current British state writ large. The fact that, a warship is in a state of advanced readiness, which I don't know how you can be.
What does that actually mean?
It's either ready or it's not.
Either ready or you're not. No, but he also appeared in front of like a liaison committee a couple of days ago, and he basically spent half the time saying that like the reason why shit's not been happening correctly is because of, and there's Bernard Jenkins, I think Bernard Jenkins on the Tory MP on the panel. He's like, it's because of you guys, right? Like you didn't leave us any money, and I had to spend like the first few months in the job dealing with all of your crap. I don't know. It was like it felt like how PMQs should be. Like he was just ripping into them without having to scream. My sad sack though, I have two nominees. One is the British economy. Apparently, our economy is going to be hit hardest by the US-Israel-led war in Iran, which is fantastic news.
We've managed to link our energy pricing system to the most volatile form of energy.
What could possibly go wrong?
We are quite exposed.
My other sad sack would be whoever insures phones for people who work in Downing Street. Because Morgan McSweeney, I was going to say friend of the show, but he's not been on, former chief advisor to the Prime Minister, has reported that his phone was stolen. So we can't actually see any of the messages that he may or may not have had with Peter Mandelson. But it got me thinking about Boris Johnson, forgetting his password, Rishi Sunak.
Everyone's phone just stops working.
As soon as there's any prospect of an inquiry, they either lose the phone or it stops working or they forget their password. So
very
I'm sure there's a lot of insurance payouts.
It happens that he phoned them back to Westminster and he said, we'll have to wipe the phone. So even if it is found now, it can't be. And also when they gave the address of him being robbed, the call handler put it in a different part of London. So instead of saying, I think it was like Belgrave Road, the call handler took it as Belgrave Street, which was in Tower Hamlets, the other side of London. So the whole time they were like acting as if he was like, it's down by the park, but there was also a park at the end of this street. So the whole sort of investigation took place in a completely different borough of London. So the whole thing was a complete mess. Again, a lovely sort of image there of the British institutions.
Indeed, maybe something for Plaid to come in and stabilise.
Devolve the Met Police.
Just put the whole country in the WhatsApp group with the government. You may as well just get it out of the way.
Brilliant. Well, Taylor, thank you very much for
John Convera, it was really nice to talk to you.
Best of luck in the elections.
Hopefully we get 110%.
See ya.